Welcome back to another video of Rugged West stories. Tonight's tale begins on the cold frontier plains, where one cowboy's act of kindness turned into the most dangerous moment of his life. Jack Callahan was just an ordinary man, living alone on his ranch. But when he found a starving native child outside his barn, he made a choice: to feed him, to give him shelter. Jack thought it was nothing more than simple mercy. But by sunrise, the ground shook with the thunder of hooves, and when Jack stepped outside, 200 warriors were waiting for him. This is a story of trust, betrayal, and survival in the Wild West. The wind cut sharp across the prairie that night, whistling through the gaps in the old wooden barn. Jack Callahan was tightening the reins on his horse when he heard it. A faint shuffle, too soft to be a coyote, too hesitant to be a thief. Jack froze. His hand reached for the Winchester rifle propped by the door. "Out here you didn't take chances." From the shadows, a figure stumbled forward. Not a man, not an outlaw. A boy. He was small, no more than 10 years old, with thin arms and hollow cheeks. His clothes were torn, his moccasins ragged. The boy swayed on his feet, one hand clutching his stomach. His lips were cracked, his eyes wide with the kind of hunger that stripped a child of everything but survival. Jack lowered the rifle slowly. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. The boy said nothing. He just stared at the cornbread sitting on Jack's workbench like it was gold. Jack sighed, tore a chunk from the loaf and placed it on a wooden crate between them. He stepped back. The boy lunged forward, snatched the bread, and devoured it in desperate bites. Crumbs tumbled down his chin, but he didn't stop until every last piece was gone. Jack filled a tin cup with water and handed it over. The boy drank so fast the cup rattled in his hands. When he finally set it down, Jack crouched low, looking him in the eye. "Where's your folks, kid? You running from something?" No answer. Just silence broken only by the barn creaking in the wind. Jack rubbed his jaw. "Don't matter. You can stay here tonight, safer than out there with the wolves." He spread a blanket across some hay, guiding the boy to it. The child curled up without a word, exhaustion dragging him down. But Jack couldn't sleep. He sat by the lantern, thoughts gnawing at him. If this boy's people came looking, what would they think? That Jack had kidnapped him? That he was hiding him? Settlers had been killed for less. By midnight, Jack stepped outside, lantern in hand. The prairie stretched wide under a silver moon. That's when he saw it, faint flickers of light on the horizon. One fire, then another, then 5, 10 signals. Jack's gut tightened. He'd seen war parties call each other with fire before. The boy shifted in his sleep inside the barn, murmuring words Jack couldn't understand. Jack kept his eyes on the distant flames. His jaw set. If those fires were meant for the boy, then by morning, this barn wouldn't be his alone anymore. The first light of dawn spilled over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Jack hadn't slept a wink. His rifle rested across his knees as he sat by the barn door, eyes fixed on the horizon. And then, he heard it. Hooves. At first just a distant rumble, but within minutes the ground began to tremble. The sound growing louder, stronger, like thunder rolling over the plains. Jack stood, gripping his rifle tight. Though he knew it wouldn't matter, they came in waves. Warriors on horseback, painted faces gleaming in the morning sun, feathers dancing in the wind. Rifles, bows, and spears gleamed like steel under firelight. 200 strong, they formed a long wall that curved across the edge of Jack's land. The boy had woken too. He stood barefoot at the barn door, clutching the blanket Jack had given him. His small chest heaved as his eyes darted between Jack and the riders outside. Jack's voice was low, steady. "That your people, boy?" The child gave no answer. He only stepped out into the open, his feet sinking into the morning frost. The warriors parted. From their center rode a man larger than life. Broad shoulders, long black hair tied with eagle feathers, and a buffalo hide cloak draped across his chest. Around his neck hung claws of a mountain lion, and in his hand he carried a spear taller than Jack himself. The boy ran to him, clutching his waist like he'd found his world again. The man bent down, said something in his tongue, and the boy nodded. Then his eyes lifted to Jack, sharp, unforgiving, cold as the edge of a blade. Jack raised both hands slowly, his rifle still at his side. Didn't mean no harm. The boy was starving, I gave him bread, water, that's all. The air was heavy, suffocating. Every warrior's eyes locked on him, waiting for a single wrong move. Horses snorted and pawed at the dirt. Somewhere above, a hawk circled, screaming as if it too sensed blood in the air. The chief dismounted, boots crunching against the frozen earth. He stepped closer, every line of his body radiating authority. For a long moment he just studied Jack. Then in broken English he spoke. "You, come," just 2 words. But they fell like a hammer. Jack's throat tightened. He glanced at the boy who clung to the chief's side. The child looked back at him, his expression almost pleading. Jack knew he had 2 choices: refuse and die where he stood, or go and pray he lived long enough to find out why. Slowly, Jack tightened the strap on his hat, slung the rifle across his back, and mounted his horse. The circle of warriors closed in around him. The chief climbed back onto his horse, raising his hand. Signal, and then they rode. The war party moved like a river of thunder across the plains. Jack rode in the center, surrounded on all sides. His hands gripped the reins so tight his knuckles turned white. He could feel their eyes on him, every man ready to strike if he so much as breathed wrong. They rode for hours, deeper and deeper into land Jack had never dared cross. The sun climbed higher, beating down on them. Sweat dripped from Jack's brow, but he dared not wipe it. By noon, smoke appeared on the horizon. Not just a few campfires, dozens. The valley opened wide, revealing a massive encampment. Tipis dotted the land like teeth, with smoke curling from their tops. Drums echoed low and steady, rattling the air. As they entered, the people stopped what they were doing. Women froze with baskets in their hands. Children stood silent, clutching their mothers' skirts. All eyes fixed on Jack, the cowboy in their midst, surrounded like a prisoner. The warriors led him into the heart of the camp. At its center stood a massive fire pit, flames licking the sky. The chief dismounted, motioning for Jack to do the same. Jack slid off his horse, boots sinking into the dirt. His heart pounded, but his face stayed steady. The chief pointed at him, his voice booming loud enough to shake the ground. "Trial!" The word roared across the valley, echoing from every tipi. The warriors pounded their weapons against their shields, their voices rising like thunder. Jack's gut sank. Trial, but for what? For feeding a starving child? Or for something far worse? The circle around the great fire tightened. Drums thundered like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Warriors stamped their feet, their chants rising into the air as smoke curled into the sky. Jack stood alone in the center, sweat rolling down his back despite the cold wind. He had been in gunfights, ambushes, and standoffs with outlaws. But nothing had ever felt like this. Hundreds of eyes burned into him, not with greed or anger, but with something heavier, judgment. The chief raised his hand, and silence fell like a blade. He stepped into the circle, the starving boy by his side. His voice carried, strong and heavy with meaning. "This child," he said, pointing at the boy, "is the son of White Eagle, a warrior who died protecting our land. For 3 days the boy wandered without food, without family. And you," the chief's hand shot toward Jack, "you fed him." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others frowned. The chief continued, "Among our people, to feed a hungry child is an act of honor." But his voice hardened, his eyes narrowing. "This is a time of war. The white man has burned our villages, stolen our land, killed our families. Why should we believe you did not feed him only to take him, to make him your slave? Or worse?" The crowd growled their agreement. Spears shook in the air. Jack's jaw tightened. He felt the weight of 200 warriors pressing down on him. Slowly, he raised his voice. "I didn't take the boy. I didn't harm him. I just gave him bread and water. That's all. Any man with a beating heart would have done the same." The words hung in the air, fragile as glass. The chief stared at him, unreadable. Then he spoke again. "If you are a man of honor, you will prove it." "By trial." The crowd erupted. The warriors pounded their weapons against the earth. The boy clutched the chief's cloak, his eyes wide with fear. Jack swallowed hard. "What kind of trial?" The chief lifted his spear, pointing it toward the roaring fire. "Trial of fire and blood." The warriors moved quickly. They lined the circle with spears, closing Jack inside. On the far side of the fire, 2 men stepped forward. Both were tall, broad, their faces painted in red and black. Each carried a tomahawk in one hand and a knife in the other. The crowd roared their names. voices rising in a frenzy. These were not ordinary men. These were champions, warriors chosen to fight in the name of their people. Jack's stomach turned to stone. He'd faced outlaws before, even bandits armed to the teeth. But this was something else. The chief's voice rang out. If you survive, you walk free. If you die, your blood feeds the earth. The drums began again. Boom, boom, boom. Jack's hand went to his belt, but they'd already taken his gun. He had nothing but the knife they tossed at his feet, a single blade against two men. He bent, picked it up, and twirled it once in his hand. The leather grip was worn, the steel nicked with use. He muttered under his breath, "Well, Jack, looks like it's just you and the devil again." The first warrior lunged. Jack sidestepped, the tomahawk whistling past his head. He swung his knife, catching the man's arm. A shallow cut, but enough to draw blood. The crowd howled. The second warrior came from behind, swinging low. Jack dropped, rolling across the dirt, the heat of the fire searing his skin. He scrambled to his feet, barely blocking a slash meant for his throat. Sweat poured into his eyes. His lungs burned. His muscles screamed. But he didn't stop. Every move was instinct. Dodge, slash, duck, strike. The first warrior's tomahawk clipped Jack's shoulder, tearing through his shirt. Pain ripped across his body. But Jack gritted his teeth and shoved forward. Ramming his knife into the man's side, the warrior roared, stumbling back, blood spilling into the dirt. But before Jack could breathe, the second came at him with a fury. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. Jack's arm trembled, strength fading. One mistake, one slip, and it would all be over. The boy watched from the edge of the circle, his small fists clenched. His lips moved as if whispering a prayer. The chief's eyes narrowed, Jack's knife locked against the warrior's tomahawk. Their faces inches apart, teeth bared. The warrior snarled. "You die now, white man." Jack's muscles quivered. His legs buckled, and then instinct took over. He twisted, dropping low, driving his shoulder into the warrior's gut. They crashed into the dirt. Jack's knife plunged once, twice, before the tomahawk slipped from the man's hand. Silence fell. Both warriors lay on the ground. One clutching his side, groaning. The other unmoving, his blood soaking into the earth. Jack staggered to his feet, chest heaving, his knife slick with crimson. His vision blurred, but he kept his back straight. He looked at the chief, his voice hoarse but steady. "There's your trial." For a long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the chief raised his hand and the crowd roared, not in anger, not in rage, but in respect. Drums pounded. Spears rose into the air. The chants shook the valley. The boy ran forward, grabbing Jack's hand. His eyes shone with something new, gratitude. But the chief's face remained unreadable. He stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the fire. His voice was low, heavy. "You have proved your courage, cowboy. But courage alone is not enough. There is another test, one that no blade can win." The night passed slow, each hour dragging heavier than the last. Jack sat by a small fire, his wounds burning, his muscles aching from the trial. He had fought for his life before, but never like this. Never in front of 200 strangers waiting to see him fall. The boy lay curled up beside him, fast asleep, clutching Jack's coat as if it were his own. The sight softened Jack's heart, but it also made the weight of tomorrow heavier. At sunrise, the chief appeared, his shadow stretched long in the orange light. Warriors stood behind him, their faces painted, horses ready. "It is time," he said. Jack rose slowly, every bone stiff, but his eyes steady. "What exactly am I riding into?" The chief's voice was grim. "The mountain holds the spirits of our ancestors. Only a man with truth in his heart can pass. Many enter, few return." Jack's gut twisted, but he nodded. He had no choice. The warriors mounted, and the ride began. They rode hard toward the mountains, their jagged peaks tearing into the sky. The closer they came, the colder the air grew, biting against Jack's skin. Snow patches dotted the ground, even though spring was rising on the plains below. At the foot of the largest peak, the party stopped. The chief dismounted, pointing toward a narrow path winding into the cliffs. "You go alone," he said. Jack glanced at the warriors, at the boy who stared at him with wide, hopeful eyes. Then he tightened his coat, adjusted his hat, and began the climb. The trail twisted like a snake, climbing higher and higher. Loose stones shifted under his boots. Wind howled through the cliffs, carrying whispers that made his skin crawl. Hours passed. His legs burned. His lungs screamed, and then the world grew silent. At the mouth of a cave, Jack stopped. A fire burned inside, though no one was there to tend it. Shadows danced along the stone walls, forming shapes that seemed almost alive. Jack stepped forward. A voice echoed through the chamber, not from one man, but from many. Deep and layered like thunder. "Why do you come, cowboy?" Jack froze. His hand hovered near his knife, though he knew steel meant nothing here. "I didn't come by choice," he said, his voice steady. "Your people brought me. Said I had to prove myself." The fire flared. Shadows shifted. "You fed the child," the voices rumbled. "But was it mercy? Or guilt?" Jack clenched his fists. "It was mercy. Boy was starving. I couldn't just let him die." The shadows twisted again, forming shapes of men with rifles, flames consuming villages. Jack's chest tightened. "You are white," the voices boomed. "Your kind brings only death. Why should you be different?" Jack's throat ached, but he forced the words out. "Because I don't care about color or land or war. I care about doing what's right. That boy, he needed help. And I'd do it again, even if it brought every warrior in the West down on me." The fire blazed higher, roaring like a storm. For a long moment, silence. Then the voices spoke again, softer now. "You speak with truth. You walk with courage. You may leave, but your life is bound to the boys. Protect him and you live. Fail him, and both your souls will wander." Jack's eyes widened, but before he could answer, the fire collapsed into embers. The cave grew dark. When he stepped outside, the sun was already setting. The warriors waited at the foot of the mountain, silent and watchful. The chief stepped forward. "Well," Jack took a long breath. "The spirit said I live, but my life's tied to the boys. He's under my protection now." The chief studied him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "You are no enemy here," he said. "From this day, you are brother to our people." The warriors raised their weapons to the sky, letting out a cry that echoed through the valley. The boy rushed to Jack's side, clutching his hand. For the first time, a smile broke across his thin face. That night, the camp celebrated with fire and song. Jack sat among them, the boy leaning against his arm, his plate full of food. For the first time in years, Jack felt something stirred deep in his chest, a sense of belonging. When the chief sat beside him, Jack turned. "Why me? Why trust me after all that trial?" The chief's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Because the spirits test only the heart. And yours, cowboy?" "Beats true." Jack looked out at the stars above, the boy asleep at his side, the sound of drums rolling across the prairie. For the first time since he'd come west, Jack Callahan wasn't just a lone cowboy. He was part of something greater,